You found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Well, hello and welcome back, everybody. And to beat Dapper to the punch, please, Peter, just put Dapper in there, please. I beg you. Just put him in the intro. He's going to say it. I got to beat him to it.
Hey, everybody, it's Dapper Dino, Jackson Wheat's most popular guest who's never actually in the intro.
Oh, my God. I think that's his like opening line now. I say, hello, everyone. He says, I'm still not in the intro.
To be fair, that's not Jackson's fault. I mean, that's my fault.
No, it's
I will get I will get to that eventually, but up until now,
it's fine.
I'm really I've got work for at least 2 more months.
I know, Peter. I know you're busy. Dapper is our favorite Mesozoic friend, even though we haven't quite gotten to the Mesozoic yet. We are today going to address the Paleozoic. If you caught the last episode in this series, our natural history series, it was the Precambrian. So from 4.6 billion years ago to like 540 million years ago. So a long time, like 80% of Earth's history.
If we keep going at that pace, we'll be done in like 5 minutes.
That's true, yeah.
So guys, in the Paleozoic, some stuff happened. And then in the Mesozoic, a bit more of it happened. And then in the Cenozoic, a bunch of other stuff happened. And now here we are.
Yeah, there you go. That's roll credits.
That's approximately the pace we covered things last time.
Yeah, that's true. There were some fish, then some lizards, then some mammals, and that's it. That's the whole thing.
There was some dinosaurs mixed in there too.
Yeah. Anyway. So at the end of the last episode, so what we ended on was the Ediacaran, or Ediacaran, however you want to pronounce it, the Garden of Ediacara, which comes from a series of sites, or which originally came from a series of sites in Australia, which now we know of other sites across the world. But that period lasted from 635 to 540 million years ago, thereabouts. And that was when we get our first glimpse of macroscopic life. We went from the prokaryotes, which arose somewhere between 4 and about 3.8 billion years ago. Eukaryotes arose somewhere around 2 billion years ago. And then we got our first macroscopic organisms a little more recently than 635 million years ago. So this kind of makes sense, given what we know about the phylogenetics of the organisms alive today. This stratigraphic record makes sense. The most are distantly the organisms most distantly related to us are prokaryotes, like bacteria and archaea, and then from within archaea, eukaryotes arose, and then from within eukarya, you have plants, fungi, animals, all those guys that we discussed last time. So the stratigraphy makes sense given the phylogeny, which is what we would expect under evolution, because evolution is descent with inherent genetic modification, or technically a change in allele frequencies in a population over generations. Well, we did a whole show about that. So if you want to know more about that, go check out the other show. All right. Slideshow, please. The Paleozoic. Also, who do we have today? Ink Boy and Benthoven, no relation. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a great time. All right, the Paleozoic. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Cambrian. Everyone's probably heard of the Cambrian. That's one of the most famous periods of the Paleozoic, the other probably being the Permian, the very end. But the Cambrian was the very first period of the Paleozoic, lasted from 542 to 485 million years ago. And as we mentioned at the end of the last episode, there was a rise in oxygen levels at the end of the Ediacaran and then into the Cambrian, and then it kept rising and rising and rising as you go into the Carboniferous, and it rose way up in the Carboniferous due to plants, but we're not quite there yet. So there were a few things that sort of all related caused what's known as the Cambrian Explosion. And the Cambrian Explosion is a bit of a misnomer because when you think of an explosion, you think flashy and very fast. But the Cambrian lasted somewhere between 20 and 30 million years, depending on which source you pick. But those are typically the dates given. It lasted from the start of the Cambrian, 542 million years to something like 520 million years or 510 million years, depending on whichever one you want to go with. And it's a bit arbitrary, and we'll look at a chart a little bit later that explains why this is arbitrary. But so the factors which promoted the Cambrian Explosion, which is the radiation of predominantly bilaterian clades, because if you remember, we saw a few very primitive bilaterian organisms at the end of the last episode, and some sort of bilaterally symmetrical organisms, which again...
Yeah, glide symmetry.
Right, which again sort of makes sense if these are organisms who haven't quite figured out bilateral symmetry yet. They're most of the way there, but not quite there yet. If you look at the more basally derived branches on the Tree of Life, you don't have bilateral symmetry. For sponges, they're asymmetric. For placozoans, they don't really have symmetry. I don't think they're even considered like radially symmetric. They're like amoeboids. They're just weird little guys. And then you have your Cnidarians and Ctenophores, both of which are radially symmetric. And so now we're getting into our bilaterally symmetrical animals. So they have, approximately, they're two essentially mirror sides. That's basically what bilaterian means. They are bilaterally symmetric. And this includes the arthropods. Oh, we have a super chat. Sorry. I just went from watching myself in a Daphne Rimmel video to this from my $5 from Artemis Brain Sample. Thank you. Appreciate it. Can we pin? Oh, there it is. I see it. Okay, there we go. So the factors which promoted this radiation of bilaterally symmetrical organisms included the rise of oxygen, as we saw. So basically what that allows is organisms to get larger, because more oxygen means you can do more aerobic respiration, which is how you produce your currency of cellular energy, basically, if you want to think about it that way, which is called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. And you use that to do essentially all of your cellular processes, right? So your mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It produces the molecule needed for you to complete various cellular functions and to live, to maintain thermodynamic disequilibrium with your environment. So you have a rise in oxygen. So this lifted the size constraints on organisms. This promoted organisms to explore more niches. So instead of everyone being like a sediment bulldozer, for instance, you're just eating organic particles in the sediment, some of these organisms could swim. They could become pelagic rather than all being benthic. Or maybe they were both. Maybe they were benthic sometimes and pelagic other times. And
maybe they were benthopelagic?
Benthopelagic, yeah. So there were niches that could now be filled, which couldn't be filled originally because there wasn't enough energy, that could be taken in by the organisms to fill those niches. So that could have also fueled arms races, evolutionary arms races. So you have, everybody's kind of ignoring each other, just eating, carbon molecules in the sediment.
Dirt.
And now,
eating dirt.
Yeah, eating dirt, basically. Everyone's doing little wormy things. But now you can hunt others. You can take in, smaller organisms.
It's like that bit in Sport when you unlock the little chompy side-to-side mouth.
Right.
Suddenly, watch out. Now spikes are important.
Right, and that's basically what happened. Yeah, we'll talk about. I think Waxia is on one of our little slides eventually. So yeah. Suddenly you have guys who can develop things like armor shells and spikes and grasping appendages and all this sort of stuff. In fact, that big guy you see in the picture on the bottom right, the guy in the top left of that picture is called Anomalocaris, or Anomalocaris, however you pronounce it. And those appendages on the front are called his great appendages. And he uses those to grab on to his prey and then feed it to the mouth, which is under his face. Interestingly, there are fossil trilobites that have the imprints of having been attacked by Anomalocaris, and so it seems that they were attacked shortly after molting. Interestingly, so
I mean, that's when I would want to attack a trilobite.
Right, exactly. Yeah, when they're soft and squishy. Like, you guys have probably seen cicadas, the shells of cicadas on trees and things. Well, immediately after they do that, they're soft. They have to build up their ectosome again, right? Their epicuticle, whatever. And so they have to get tough again.
Not very well related, but also that final molt is when they get wings. All insects only get wings with their final molt.
Yeah.
Or if they get wings at all.
Oh, right. Yeah. There is also a statistical trend for Anomalocaris to have attacked, I think it was from the right side on trilobites, which is very curious to me. Don't know why the right side in particular, but
maybe they were just right-handed.
Right clawed?
Yeah, right appendage did.
Right appendage. Yeah. Would you like to add anything?
I do want to point out that Anomalocarids, which is a wider group, are very interesting, and there were filter feeding examples and bigger and smaller examples, and they're really cool. And they're probably somewhere closer to arthropods than anything else, so they're probably stem arthropods.
Yes. Yep. They are absolutely stem arthropods. Next slide, please. And it's been a while since I looked, so I don't quite remember where I put the slides for those guys, but we'll see. So Flora. So animals always get all the attention. Let's talk about some plants for a minute here. So this little guy is called a Paraphernalia, which is like a bryophyte, but it's not quite a bryophyte. It looks like the bryophytes. Let me explain what that is. Bryophytes are mosses. So there's bryophyte. There's Bryophyta sensulato, which is like the broad sense, and that includes hornworts, liverworts, and mosses. And then there's Bryophyta sensustricto, which are just the mosses. It's that one particular phylum of plants. And so we discussed Chara and the other green algae, which gave rise to the embryophytes, the land plants, in the last video. So this is a transitional fossil between the more Chara-like algae and the more embryophyte-like algae. So, anything to add?
Yeah, plants are delicious sometimes. That's all I got.
You're a ceratosaur. You got eating plants?
You never seen like a cat or a dog go eat some grass? Come on, man.
Well, fair enough, I guess.
Just because something's called a carnivore doesn't mean it never eats plants.
Fair enough.
And vice versa. You ever see a horse eat a baby chicken? Because I have.
I've seen the cow videos where they do that, and that is horrifying.
Yeah. So, the whole, herbivore, carnivore, it's almost never quite that cut and dry.
You're right. Next slide, please. Or like, deer licking like the skulls of dead deer or stuff like that for calcium.
Yeah. Look, you know what? If a little bundle of calcium just happens to wander by your face and you're really hungry, you need some calcium, you're going to chomp it. What are you going to do? Like,
that's probably true.
Yeah.
Let's talk about bryophytes. So we're actually into the land plants now, the embryophyta. Embryophyta. So what you're looking at here is a bryophyte. It's a moss. And that green portion is the gametophyte. So those are the parts that make the sperm and eggs. And then when the eggs get fertilized, then they develop into these sporophyte, which are those little brown parts sticking out of the top. And then those make spores, which can then be washed out by water or blown away by wind and land somewhere else to make more gametophytes. And that's just how mosses, liverworts, and hornworts, that's how they reproduce. That's their life cycle. Now, bryophytes are basally derived embryophytes relative to angiosperms and gymnosperms. So their life cycle is more like that of an algae than like the later plants. They spend more of their life cycle in the gametophyte phase than the sporophyte phase. The sporophyte is totally dependent on the gametophyte. Right? Can't live on its own. The gametophyte's doing all the photosynthesis. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered that pretty well.
Okay. Next slide, please. And there you go again. Just, in more detail, more kind of step by step. So the green at the, or sorry, the red is your diploid stage, and then the green or blue-ish, whatever color that is your haploid stage. So if you guys remember, haploid means you have half your full complement of chromosomes, and diploid just in this instance means you have your full complement. Although it also means you can only have two, or you may only have two complements of chromosomes. So it's kind of confusing how that's used sort of both ways, but regardless. Okay, next slide, please. It just so happens that for humans, for instance, we are both diploid in the sense that we have two full complements of chromosomes, and that's our full complement. So, yes. All right, so these are just sort of sundry Cambrian fauna that I like, and I think people should know about. So that guy Atoya over in the top left is a preapulid worm. So preapulids are the penis worms. They're still around today. And the fossil, the trace fossil, which defines the Cambrian boundary, so it appears like exactly 542 million years ago, is a preapulid fossil. They make these unique little burrows, and that trace burrow which is called Treptichnus pedum, because interestingly in paleontology, you also have to do binomial nomenclature for trace fossils.
Yes.
So
the big reason for that is you can't realistically definitively tie a trace fossil to a fossil taxon of from remains of an animal. So you get ichnogenera and ichnospecies.
Yes, but it also gets a little confusing because while you may have a burrow that's called Treptichnus pedum, and there was a paper I read about this a while back. It was like Mesolimulus versus Archaeopteryx. And so Mesolimulus, which is a horseshoe crab, can leave footprints in the sand, and those footprints have their own ichnogenus, but an Archaeopteryx's feather is Archaeopteryx lithographica.
That's because it's part of its body.
Yeah, it's just, if you find the feather alone, it's, not given an ichnotaxon. I just thought that was
because it's not an
interesting.
ichno-fossil. It's part of the body of an animal.
I suppose. I don't know.
I mean, it grew it itself.
That's true.
If you grow it on your own body yourself, that's a part of your body.
I suppose. Hallucigenia is an early onychophoran. That's the guy in the top right. So the onychophorans are the velvet worms. And interestingly, this guy was originally reconstructed upside down.
And so backwards, wasn't
it? Yeah, I think it was upside down and backwards. The spines were thought to be his little legs, and then his head was like his tail. And it was thought that all those little tentacles were used to grab food, like all his little walking legs. Turned out, with better technology, like, oh, nope, we got him upside down and backwards.
To be fair, it was never very clear if that construction was accurate, and there were people who were constructing it in different ways. And that's kind of how it got the name, because everyone was like, I don't know what this is. It looks like a hallucination.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I know Autoya and Hallucigenia. I don't know about Wawaxia and Halkieria. But they're both from a fossil site called the Burgess Shale, which was, I think, the first definitively Cambrian strata that was found. There may have been others that were like just not identified, but that was the first one to be described as Cambrian strata, and it comes from Canada. And there have been like since thousands and thousands of fossils that have come out of it. And there's a really good book on it, which is Wonderful Life by Stephen Jay Gould. Recommend. Good book. Interesting stuff. So then there's Wiwaxia, which is a possible early mollusk. I think from what I've seen of the research, researchers tend to lean mollusk on its affinity. And then Halkieria is very likely an early mollusk.
It
And
does look like a stretched out bivalve.
Yes, it does. And I absolutely love this fossil because it's got the bivalve shells on both ends. So today's, bivalves may just represent very much shrunken Halkieria-like organisms.
Although I will say those shells are not quite symmetrical, so
No,
that's
not.
a bit of a problem because bivalve shells are characteristically symmetrical.
Yeah. I just thought it was very, very interesting. Something like that, having existed with the shells on both ends. And essentially all mollusks, well, let's see, except for polyplacophorans, all mollusks either have like one or no shells. The cephalopods typically have one shell, except for those who have lost it. Scaphopods have one shell. Gastropods have one. Monoplacophorans have one. Then polyplacophorans have a bunch of shells, and then aplacophorans have no shells. And then bivalves have two. So mollusks are kind of interesting in how many shells they have.
Some gastropods have lost their one shell.
Correct. Yeah, and some have lost their one shell.
Yeah.
So, anything you want to add on this slide?
I kind of want to know what Halkieria tasted like. Like, would it taste like a clam or an oyster?
I am not a fan of oysters, so I'll let you have it. It's all yours.
What about clams? Mussels? Snails?
I've had mussel in a couple of things. I've actually never eaten snail. Some
What about
escargot.
octopus or squid?
I've had some.
Have you had cuttlefish, though?
No, I have not had cuttlefish. Have you had cuttlefish?
I've had cuttlefish, octopus, squid, snail, clams, oysters, mussels. Let's see. I've had scallop. Yep, I've had scallops. I've had a large section of the mollusks. I've also had jellyfish.
Interesting. But have you ever had scaphopod?
Not
You
that
ever
I
eaten a
know
tusk
of.
shell? I don't even know if they're edible. So who knows?
I'm sure there's something you can do. Look, if people can make fugu edible, I'm sure they can make that edible too.
I suppose that's probably true. That's if it exists, somebody eats it. Should basically be a rule.
Yeah, at least some part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next slide, please.
Heck, potato plants are horribly poisonous unless you eat the tuber.
Yeah. Here we are, Dapper. You said you want to talk about Opabinia.
Opabinia is the best animal that has ever existed in the Paleozoic. It has 5 eyes. I don't know why. It just does. It has a weird little trunk that ends in a jaw, which makes it a non-jawed animal, which is fun. No one knows what it ate. No one really knows how it swam. Yeah, it's really cool.
Mhm.
And I wish they were still around.
Don't
Also,
eat all.
It has some resemblance to Anomalocarids. If you look, it has like a similar kind of like these
Yes.
little like fin-like pods that turn up, or posteriorly, and like it's got a big face thing that it uses to manipulate things.
Yes.
But the other thing is exactly how closely related they are isn't very clear because Opabinia is really, really weird, even compared to the stem arthropods, which it almost certainly is. But what do you do with it? I don't know.
So
It's just really cool.
from what I've seen of phylogenies, they tend to go Opabinia, then Anomalocaris, and then recently Calentia was added to that, and then it really gets weird because there's a group not represented here, which is called the bivalved arthropods, and they're called the bivalved arthropods because they're probably not a monophyletic group. They were thought to be like ostracods originally, because ostracods have a sort of similar looking shape. But with the bivalve arthropods, some researchers think they are stem arthropods. Some argue they are crown arthropods. If that's the case, I think that there's probably a case to be made that some of them are stem and some are crown, because that does happen with different fossil groups. So they're like, so maybe bivalve arthropods represent like a grade rather than a clade. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if that turned out to be the case. I really wouldn't. So, which, you know, again, if evolution were true and these organisms were, you know, related, you kind of expect this sort of blurring of the boundaries, and that's exactly what we find. So,
Okay, but why is there no Morella? Or is that a different slide?
well, it is a crown arthropod. I believe it even nests within like the or it's either stem mandibulata or crown mandibulata. I don't remember which, but
But is it on your slideshow?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
If there isn't a Morella on the slideshow, I'm going to flip the table.
With those tiny arms?
Yeah, it's a small table.
Morella is also a Burgess shale arthropod. It is, in fact, I believe, the most common Burgess shale arthropod. There are even like parts of the Burgess shale that are like named like the Morella beds or something like that, because it's just so common. If I remember correctly, it survived in like the Ordovician. It went for a very long time, whereas the Anomalocarids kind of had their heyday in the Cambrian, then they kind of fizzled out towards the start of the Ordovician.
But the existence of Ordovician Anomalocarids is actually a fairly recent thing. We didn't know about that.
Yeah, so there could be lots more. They could go on. I mean, heck, the Lobopods actually went into like the Carboniferous, so there could be Anomalocarids, you know, later on.
Maybe we'll find some Anomalocarids down in the depths of the Marianas Trench. Probably not, though.
Yeah, I think the trench is predominantly like the macroscopic organisms are like mollusks. I think predominantly, so like clams and mussels, things like that. I don't think there are a whole
I feel
lot
like you need to watch more Gemini Home Video.
What is that?
Oh, it's a great YouTube channel. You should check it out.
Do they explore the depths of the ocean?
Yeah.
That does sound pretty cool. I mean, there are like giant amphipods in the deep sea, but I don't think they're hadal zoned. I think they're abyssal zones. Could be wrong, but I don't think so. And then, of course, trilobites. Everybody loves trilobites, right?
Well,
No?
yeah. I mean, Anomalocaris in particular loves trilobites.
How can we have penis worms before penises? That's quite a question.
Well, I think that, first of all, is it before penises? Because that depends heavily on how broad of a definition you're taking. If you just mean
That's true.
any intermittent organ, then it's probably not before penises.
That could be true. Yeah, because crustaceans and various other arthropods have peni. So
do mollusks.
Yeah.
So if we're doing the broad, any intermittent organ is a penis, then it probably isn't before penises. But if we're doing the mammalian penis, well, then yeah, okay.
Yeah, fair enough. Next slide, please. Yes, a phylogeny of mollusks. If you look down there and sort of the bottom left, you see Halkieria.
Now, Jackson, I'm confused because we have some cephalopods stemming from not outer space. Are you saying that the
you really want to bring that up, Dapper?
The conclusion of every evolutionary biology is not that cephalopods are from outer space?
Oh, God. I guess we have to talk about that now. All right.
I just want to make sure.
Oh, Lord. Okay, so for anyone who is blissfully uninitiated, there was a physicist named Fred Hoyle. I'm pretty sure he's dead by now.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Who was a weird. He was a physicist, mathematician. So I'm sure he did math fine, but he had some really bonkers ideas about biology. So funny enough, if you've ever heard the tornado in a junkyard analogy, he actually made that up, but not in reference to evolution. He made that up with reference to abiogenesis occurring on Earth. So the origin of life occurring on Earth. That's what tornado in a junkyard was made in reference to. But the thing was, it gets even weirder because he believes life started naturally. It just didn't start on Earth. It started in outer space. And according to Hoyle and his student, Chandra Wickrama Singh, who I believe is still alive, viruses, bacteria, and various different genes are constantly falling to Earth from outer space. And it just so happens, according to them, that the octopus managed to get some of those outer space genes in its genome somehow, because they're capable of horizontal gene transfer, I guess. That's a
I
thing.
mean, technically, most things are. So
I mean, yeah, I guess they just so happened to land like on a gamete and was
yeah,
incorporated into its genetic material. That's how that happened.
octopus has got space genes, man.
Yep, that's so. They really don't deserve anyone's time, and weirdly enough, Wickrama Singh has like a couple people who he writes papers with. I don't know if any of them are actually biologists, but they put out like little papers every so often, which get press coverage because, of course, they do. It's someone claiming octopi have genes from outer space. And then you got people who come along and go, oh, evolutionists believe that octopi have genes from outer space. And no, nobody in the field of cephalopod research actually believes that. I'll just throw that out there. Nobody. Not one. So that's what that is. I'm sorry that you guys had to hear about that.
I'm not. I find that whole thing hilarious.
Oh man. Benthoven says Earth is hollow. I don't think so, but you know,
Wrong.
you learn new things every day, I guess. Anyway. All right, next slide, please. The evolution of vertebrates.
That worm reminds me of an acorn.
I'm trying to. Peter, the thing is not. Oh wait, no, never mind. I remember now.
No, I see it.
Never mind. Yeah, I got it. Okay, there we go.
To be fair, the Earth is hollow, just like a cream egg. The cream is in the hollow part, as Earth's molten core is in the hollow part.
Magma is the forbidden pudding.
The forbidden pudding. Yes, absolutely. We endorse forbidden pudding. Okay. The evolution of vertebrates. So, if you look at the bottom left of that picture, you see a hemichordate, or also known as an acorn worm. So, that what is it? Saccoglossus profileski, I think. I know the genus is Saccoglossus. Well, so the guys we've been talking about so far are protostomes. Protostome means that during embryonic development, you form your mouth before your anus. So you become what's called a blastula, and you form one little opening, which is called your blastopore. And in protostomes, that becomes the mouth, and then the other end, once it reaches the other side, becomes the anus, and then you're what's called a gastrula, because you have a gastric tract. Whereas so protostomes includes annelids, so segmented worms, arthropods, mollusks, rotifers, nematodes, penis worms. The vast majority of bilaterally symmetrical animals are protostomes. The vast majority of them. But some of them are what are called deuterostomes. So instead of the blastopore becoming the mouth, it becomes the anus. So we start life as just a little butt. And some of us never leave that. Ha ha.
Also, starfish. Or sea stars, if you don't want to use the word fish of things that aren't vertebrates.
Yep. And so vertebrates, so there are two clades within deuterostomia. There is what's called ambulacraria, which are the echinoderms, so sea stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, and hemichordates, which includes acorn worms and graptolites, and that's like about it, I think. I can't think of any other hemichordates off the top of my head. And so they're the other clade. And then you have chordata. So chordata is all organisms, all deuterostomes, which have a postanal tail, pharyngeal arches, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, and a notochord, dorsal hollow nerve cord, postanal tail, and pharyngeal arches at some stage of their development. That doesn't mean through their entire development they have all these features. Like tunicates, for instance, lose most of them as they become sessile adults.
They even lose their brains. It's
They
weird.
even lose their brains. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm just going to stay on this rock for the rest of my life. I don't really need to think anymore. Let's digest my own brain.
Like a professor getting tenure. I don't remember who made that joke, but I appreciate it immensely.
Also, those pelagic tunicates need to stop.
For those who are unaware, Dapper cannot stand pelagic tunicates.
Not okay with it.
So let's see what we have there. Oh, lancelets. Okay, so interestingly, the most for a long time it was thought that the most basally derived chordates were the tunicates, because they look like little tadpoles, sort of like a lancelet at the beginning of their life, but then they settle down and become sessile and lose most of their parts. But it turns out no, lancelets, which kind of look like little fish with no fins, are in fact the most basally derived, chordates. And the sessile lifestyle of tunicates is a reversion. It's not their ancestral state. It is a derived state. And also related to the lancelet, so in that clade, which is cephalochordata, and tunicates are urochordata, you have little guys like Pikaia, who is also from the Burgess Shale. What's his name? Christopher Hitchens has this line. He was asked, why are humans here? And his response was, because Pikaia gracillans survived the Burgess decimation. Which I think is kind of a fun little quip. Even though we're probably not descended from Pikaia. But regardless.
A Pikaia-like thing, though, probably.
Yeah, something like Pikaia. Yeah, it's still, it's just a fun little quip. He was very quippy. And then you have Haikuella, which is another little Pikaia-like guy. Has a head now, so a little bit more like a vertebrate. And then you have Haikuichthyes, which then has the paired fins and also a head, so even more like a fish. And then finally you have that, what does that say, fusiform body. So you have anaspids, which were jawless fish. So the very first vertebrates were all jawless fish, and I think that may be the next slide. But before we get there, Dapper, do you have anything to add on this slide?
No, I think I covered it.
Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, we'll get back to the vertebrates.
I have
Go
to
ahead.
take a page out of Cato the Elder's book and say at the end of every slide, pelagic tunicates must be destroyed. His line was Carthage, but I don't really care about Carthage, so.
Looks like you're safe for now, Carthage. Count your blessings.
Well, no, it's already been destroyed.
Sucks to suck, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, by Carthaginian Empire, you idiots.
Yeah, come get us, Carthage. So the Cambrian Explosion. Maybe I should have had this. Yeah, I probably should have had this earlier in our PowerPoint, but here we are now.
It's okay.
So, we'll get back to vertebrates shortly. So this is an overview of the events of the Cambrian. There are some people, we're not going to name names, who claim that the Cambrian Explosion is just this near miraculous event that occurred in Earth's history where we have nothing before and just everything after. Well, that's not true.
See previous episode.
See previous episode. But even within the actual events of the Cambrian, that's not true. First of all, not all animal phyla are present in the Cambrian. I think it's only I think it's 14 or 15 out of 30, 32, something like that. Then I think it's 9 more show up later, either in the Paleozoic or the Mesozoic or the Cenozoic. And then there are several phyla that have no fossil record at all.
Yep.
Like, what is it called? Acanthocephala, for instance.
I think rotifers also don't have a fossil record or something like that.
Their fossil record goes back to the Eocene, but yeah, it's pretty recent.
I'm going to go ahead and guess that there were rotifers before the Eocene, though.
Yes, I would also. Okay, so yeah, you're right. The very first rotifers that we find in the fossil record look like modern Deloid rotifers. So yeah, they were probably there and had been there for a long time. We just don't have their fossil record because they're so tiny and squishy. The only reason we have them at all is they're in amber. So if you are interested in reading about amber, I encourage looking up a guy named George Pointer Jr. He's very big into amber research. It's Poinar is his last name. So the Cambrian. So you have first your soft-bodied organisms, which we discussed previously in the Ediacaran, and even before that. And then towards the end of the Ediacaran, you see your first biomineralized organisms, some of which straggle into the early Cambrian. And then after you see the first biomineralized organisms, we get the very first shelly organisms, those with like calcium carbonate shells and things like that. So this is a progression. This is a stepwise progression in a sense, right? They're not just appearing out of nowhere. You have precursors, and then you have more developed or more derived forms, and then more derived forms from there. This is also true of the trace fossil record of the Ediacaran into the Cambrian. So the Ediacaran and very early Cambrian are pretty short on trace fossils, but as you go through the different epochs of the Cambrian, you get progressively more trace fossils. So you see this blossoming radiation as you go. It's not just nothing, then everything. That's a totally inaccurate and misunderstood view of the Cambrian. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered that quite well.
Okay. All right.
Oh, actually, there is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are several phyla that disappear before we even get to the Cambrian.
Very true, like the Proarticulata.
Yeah.
Which includes the little guy, Dickinsonia.
Poor guy.
Whom we met in the last episode. There are also some from the Ediacaran who straggle into the Cambrian, like Swartpuntia, which is an arboreomorph, which, if you don't know what it is, that's fine. But it's this little guy who looks kind of like a little frond, sort of like Charnia. And they were in the late Ediacaran, and they did actually survive into the early Cambrian. Cloudina, the little wormy shelly guy, also survived into the early Cambrian before they finally go extinct. And there are a few others. So that's also an interesting question because, where did they come from? And if the start of the Cambrian is some, miracle event, why did some organisms make it into it, but not others? At any rate.
It's almost like nothing miraculous happened.
It's almost, yeah.
But that's absurd.
All right, next slide, please. And here you go again. As you can see, that looks, Dapper, I don't know about you, but that looks kind of like a stepwise, function to me. That doesn't look like just everything all at once.
It does not, no.
Yeah. That looks like, there was definitely a radiation in forms. So there was this, Scott Duke says, I'm sorry I'm late. Can you repeat what I missed? Well, as Dapper said at the very beginning, some things happened, some other things happened, and then some more things happened. And that's
true. And also, remember, gentlemen, that pelagic tunicates must be destroyed.
That was the other thing, yes.
Yeah.
So there was an idea that sort of early on that the Cambrian explosion was not real. There were these debates because the Ediacaran fossils were not really well known. No one really had any idea what they were or where they were. And so there was this idea that maybe we're just missing the fossils, or maybe they were too small, they just didn't fossilize. And that is probably the case for a lot of the organisms in the Ediacaran, as that is a problem for fossils generally. What is it? 1% of all organisms fossilize? Isn't that? It's a very small number.
I mean,
right?
honestly, I would be surprised if it's even 1%.
Right, exactly. It's a very, very, very tiny portion. But even with that, we've managed to construct, quite a substantial fossil record and a timeline of the history of Earth's events, So, anyways, so yeah, total skeletal species in that chart on the left, and you can see they go up, and then there's the since extinction event where they drop off, and archaeocyathids. So that's a group of like early sponges, and they didn't make it out of the Cambrian. They sort of formed the early reefs before corals became a thing, because coral reefs don't really pick up until the Ordovician. So you had like archaeocyatid reefs.
And even then, it's not the coral we think of today.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Other Nidarians.
Yes, yeah, some weird ones. There were actually like armored ctenophores in the Cambrian, which is weird to think about, but
yeah, that is pretty weird. Also, ctenophores, largest animals to swim with cilia, large organisms.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
Cool. Fun stuff, yeah. All right.
I don't know. I like ctenophoria. And
I mean, they're cool. Yeah, they are cool.
They don't get enough love.
Yep. I mean, a lot of them are like deep sea, so it's hard to give them love. It's hard to get down there and like, hug them and stuff. So
we should get more media attention. What we need is like some kind of horror movie where box jellies are like the big thing.
I don't know. I feel like we'd have like another Jaws thing where everyone's like killing sharks or killing stingrays after.
Maybe, but I mean, look, there was an isopod horror movie, and no one's going around killing all the isopods.
I feel like most people don't know what isopods are.
Well, there was still a horror movie about them. They still probably don't know what ctenophores are.
That's also probably true. So maybe we can do it.
Yeah. Plus, people did figure out that maybe just killing random sharks because of Jaws. Eventually, they did figure out that that's not okay.
Yeah, it took them long enough.
Well, I feel like currently our media is a little bit more savvy about telling people not to just go kill random animals because they were featured in a horror movie.
Yeah. I think you're right on that. I think that is probably true. Now,
plus, no one was going around killing dogs because of Cujo.
The legend. Well, okay, but people have like a lot of fear about not just German Shepherds, but also what are the other ones? Pit bulls. Like, pit bulls are the scariest dogs out there. Like,
yeah, but there isn't a rash of pit bull executions.
Not executions, but not necessarily. PETA. Looking
people
at you, PETA.
Well, yeah. Anyway, yeah. I'm pro ctenophore horror movie. That's just where I'm going to leave it.
What did I do?
No, not Peter. PETA. People eating tasty animals. That group. You've heard of them, right?
Yes, I'm a big fan of people eating tasty animals. That's why I've had almost every kind of mollusk you can think of.
Look, folks. I guess
I haven't had barnacles, but I'd try a goose barnacle.
I don't even know how to respond to that. So I'm gonna say the thing I was gonna say.
Okay.
PETA, we are not as you may or may not can tell, we are not big friends of PETA. Even if like being vegetarian, being vegan, great, fine, well and good. But PETA sucks. They kill lots of animals, so
everyone says that about
wouldn't recommend them as like a.
They've been known to steal children's puppies and kill them. Like, come on, man.
That's a thing that has been documented. So yeah, we're not big fans of them. Anyways, all right. Spicy takes the side. Next slide, please. All right. So I guess that was the end of the Cambrian.
Get wrecked, Cambrian.
So the Ordovician is less. I would say it's probably less well known than either the Cambrian or than the Cambrian or the Permian. But this is a period that lasts from 485 to 444 million years ago. And so it is in this period we have what's called Gobi, the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event. You get the first terrestrial plants and invertebrates, although there is a bit of debate over that. I don't remember if I have a slide on that. We'll find out. And you get the first jawed vertebrates. So at the end of the Cambrian, we have sort of wormy guys. They look sort of like worms with fins. So when you hear, for instance, that the chordate phylum appeared in the Cambrian, it's not elephants, it's not ceratosaurs, it's not hippos or lizards, or
not even most
frogs.
Things you would recognize as a fish.
Yep, not sharks, not stingrays. It's like worms with fins.
Yeah,
that's what they mean.
And by the way, Scott Duke for $9.99 US says, "I love the series you two have been doing." Well, thank you, Scott Duke. We love you too.
Let me put that up here. Yes, thank you very much, Scott Duke. We also appreciate you.
Scott Duke was there for my premiere today too, because I premiere videos on Thursday.
Nice. Yeah, go check out Dapper's videos.
Yeah, go subscribe to my channel. I need about like 200 something, and then I'll beat Jackson at subscriber count. Take that, Jackson.
I mean, at the rate I produce videos, that will not take very long, I guarantee. I'm honestly surprised you haven't passed me up yet. Erica shot up there. She's, I don't know if you guys have seen, she's up to, what is it, 34,000 subscribers?
Having some videos go semi-viral helps with that.
Yeah, she's doing fantastic. Although, I got to shout her out. She makes, just, like Dapper, she makes amazing content. Highly recommend if you guys aren't already subscribed to her or
Agreed.
Dapper. Do that immediately. Also, Dan Stern Cardinal, go subscribe to him. And subscribe to Peter, our host. Subscribe to everybody. Do it. Do it now.
If you don't, we'll know.
I mean, yeah, we can check. So
yeah, YouTube tells us.
We get like, letters in the mail that says so and so didn't sign up after you told them to in a stream.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's
now
very convenient.
You have to sleep at night knowing that fact. So actually, before I say this, what's the next slide? What is the next slide, Pete? Okay, all right. I'll say it now. Okay, so folks, I want you to. We'll look at the slide on the left in a minute. Look at the slide on the right. Now, I don't know how big your screen is, but go down to the bottom half of that picture on the right. And on the bottom half of that picture, look at the bottom left corner where you see it says Cambrian. Now compare that to the Ordovician. So the Cambrian we're going to introduce some terms right now, and those terms are diversity and disparity. So the Cambrian was an explosion, quote, because remember, the Cambrian itself is, 60 million years? 40 to about 80. So yeah, about 60 million years. Where, and in that time period, you have disparity. So disparity is a measure of the differences between clades. And in this case, it's the phyla, quote, because taxonomic orders are arbitrary, but we'll just use it as a metric. So you have these clades, and they're developing different body plans, different parts. Like mollusks have their dorsal visceral mass, and they have their mantle and their the radula in some of them, whereas arthropods have these jointed appendages. And vertebrates, or chordates have like their dorsal hollow nerve cord and all that sort of stuff. So these guys are all developing. They're developing their different parts. Probably before, I'd be willing to bet before the Cambrian, but then you really see these kind of coming to the fore in the Cambrian. You see all these different, the tinkering, the evolutionary tinkering that's going on. So you see sort of the origin of the larger clades, and then within those clades, you see a tripling of diversity in the Ordovician. So sort of with the groundwork laid, you see this big burst of diversity. So you have triple the number of species in the Ordovician that you do in the Cambrian. And that's raising the number of species within a clade, that is called diversity. That is intra, clade diversity versus interclade disparity. I think I did that correctly. Does that sound right to you, Dapper?
It especially does after I unmute. Sorry about that. Now,
yeah.
Jackson, I have a question for you.
Shoot.
On this, well, are you about to talk about the left hand?
Yeah, I was going to get to that one in a second, but yeah, go ahead.
Because I have a question about it, which is that it looks like you have an onomopode on there, and then you have some kind of decapod and a bee. Or is that a fly? I can't tell. It's kind of
I think
fuzzy.
it's a fly.
Okay. So now, last I checked, Onomopoda was inside of Crustacea.
Oh my god! I
So
should have
is
seen that
Decapoda.
coming. Oh, I should have
And yet,
seen that
last time you insisted to me
coming.
that insects were actually part of Pan-Crustacea, but this cladogram has them nested well within Crustacea. So I just feel lied to.
That is Pancrustacea, my
Okay,
favorite dinosaur.
great, but it's also Crustacea.
I can't help that these terms are possibly synonymous. I
Well-
don't make the phylogenies, I just enforce them.
Okay, but you corrected me when I said that insects were crustaceans.
Pancrustacea is the term that is used. If you look up, Crustacea referred to these guys like the fairy shrimps and crabs and lobsters and things as a monophyletic clade separate from insects. Sorry,
But it can't be monophyletic.
Technically with hexapods.
According to this, hexapods are within Crustacea unless you want to make Crustacea paraphyletic.
But Crustacea is paraphyletic, hence why Pancrustacea is the monophyletic clade
No,
encompassing.
unacceptable. It's unacceptable to say
encompassing-
said Artiodactyla is stupid. Said Artiodactyla is stupid. I'm sorry that you got wrong what animals were in Artiodactyla historically or in Crustacea historically, but that doesn't let you just change the name. Not
Look,
okay.
you say that in one breath, and then in the other breath, you say taxa are arbitrary. So I don't know what
But
to believe.
clades
Dapper.
aren't. Clades are objective, and when you name one, when you get wrong which animals were in it, you don't get to just rename the
I'm
clade
thinking-
because you feel bad.
I'm thinking we can because the name doesn't actually mean it. It's just an expression of a set of relationships. So we could call it whatever
Jackson,
we want.
the philo code has rules.
Now you're throwing the rule book at me. Okay.
There's a literal taxonomy rule book. It's called the philo code. It exists for a reason. It's
Sounds
on
like
version something
someone-
or other.
Sounds like someone is mad and is going to get retired post haste.
I'm just saying that when I'm told that insects don't nest within Crustacea, instead they're pan-crustaceans,
They are
I expect them to. Expect them to branch basally to all the other crustaceans, because that's what those words mean, my friend. The fact that other people get it wrong doesn't mean that that I should be corrected about this.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're getting into a taxonomy fight, people. That's what's happening right now.
I'm not getting in a taxonomy fight. I'm getting into a taxonomy explanation.
Mm-mm.
So
Nope. It's just like I refuse to use the phrase said Artiodactyla. I'm sorry. Cetaceans nest within Artiodactyla. They're
Do you want-
Artiodactyls.
do you want to
Deal
know
with
what's
it.
worse? I don't use set Artiodactyla either. In my
There you
opinion, well, okay, so from what I've seen, like set Artiodactyla never became popular. Like it was Artiodactyla, whales got moved, and then a couple people said set Artiodactyla, but like most people still said Artiodactyla.
Yep,
From
I'm
what
in
I
that
saw.
group. And I'm going
So-
to keep saying crustaceans, and insects are crustaceans. That's just how it's going to be.
Anyways,
So are springtails,
yes,
the other
yeah.
hexapods.
Yes, the flightless hexapods. What is that? Thysanura is not a clade anymore. It's a Zygontoma and archaic Gnatha now. So, ugh. Anyway, arthropod taxonomy.
Hooray! Hey, Brainbug might be here. Don't insult arthropods.
I don't think I've seen Brainbug in here. He may, or Brainbug may be in here, but I have not seen. Don't know. Maybe.
Well, when
Anyway.
we see a buzz in the chat, we'll know for sure.
So this chart on the left is about the potential times that different ecdysozoans invaded the land. So ecdysozoans are priapulids, nematodes, velvet worms, tardigrades, arthropods, and then a couple like small clades like loriciferans and chinorynx, things that nobody really cares about. So even though I think I had like something somewhere I made was like it says like chinorynx slayer is my username or something like that. So anyway,
I'm sure that they're worthy foes.
yeah, being like a couple centimeters long. So.
Yeah, very, very dangerous.
I don't
Well,
even know if they're that long, honestly.
Look, like I said, there was an isopod horror movie, and those isopods were only a few centimeters long. So
That's fair. Yeah. So in this chart, it says that the myriapods, so millipedes and centipedes, or their ancestors, were on land by the Cambrian. I think that's based on molecular clocks. The actual earliest fossils of myriapods are in the Ordovician, and so there's a little bit of debate over that. Either way, I wouldn't really be surprised by the answer. So, whatever, I guess. Then hexapods invaded later in the Ordovician, and you also get your. I guess I think the tick is the stand-in for like chelicerates. I guess.
I think specifically arachnids.
Possibly, I'm not entirely sure.
I mean, are there any terrestrial non-arachnids that are in Chelicerata? I'm sorry, arthropods. Are there any terrestrial arthropods that are chelicerates that are not arachnids? Is what I'm trying to say. I don't think so.
That are chelicerates that are not arachnids?
Yeah, but are terrestrial.
I don't think so, because you got, let's see, Chelicerata is what, horseshoe crabs, so Xiphosaura, the
sea spiders,
the sea spider, Pycnogonida, the sea scorpions. So I don't think so. I think
well, there is still the idea that maybe sea scorpions are actually like that arachnids fall within the sea scorpions.
I don't know.
It might be the case.
That could be the case, but from what I generally see is they tend to fall outside of arachnida. But you're right, it could be the case. It could be. That idea has definitely been floated.
Many of them would fall outside of arachnids if arachnids fall within them.
I mean, as a monophyletic clade.
Yeah.
Like, not as a grade. But it could be the case. You're right. I've certainly seen it floated. So I think the jury's
the jury's out
on that one as of right now. So
I'm not willing to say that, that's how it happened.
Yeah. Onychophorans in the Devonian. So interestingly, we don't actually see, like, I think the earliest terrestrial onychophorans are in the Carboniferous, from the fossils. Now this is molecular time trees, so I guess they did the phylogeny and found that like the ancestors of the terrestrial members like come back to that point, I guess. I don't remember. It's been a while since I looked at that paper. And then nematodes. Nematodes probably came on land as parasites following like arthropods and other things. So, fun times. Nematodes are fun. Next slide, please. Okay. Here we are, back to vertebrates. So we see the first. I don't remember if they straggle into the latest Cambrian, but I know that at least by the early Ordovician, we have our vertebrates. And they're jawless. So vertebrates evolved from those little wormy, Pikaia-like guys we saw earlier, and then the earliest ones appear in the Ordovician or latest Cambrian, and they're just like going along, kind of sucking up dirt, probably, or maybe small arthropods. It's a peaceful life. It's not until in the later in the Ordovician that you get the first jawed vertebrates, and so all those guys you see there are called placoderms, sensulato, because they're like armored. So interestingly, after you get your first jawless fish, then they develop armor, because they are having evolutionary arms races with like the sea scorpions that we mentioned earlier, and also probably some like anomalocarids and things like that. And then you get your first jawed vertebrates later. So the jaw itself is derived from one of the pharyngeal arches. And interestingly, some fish even have a second jaw, quote, second jaw, which is also derived from a pharyngeal arch.
It's called a pharyngeal jaw.
Indeed it is.
It's prominent in moray eels.
Yeah, moray eels, cichlids, wrasses, there's a whole bunch of
Interestingly, some land vertebrates retain or at least historically have retained the ability to grow teeth from the area where the pharyngeal jaw grows in other fish. So, for instance, mosasaurs had a pharyngeal tooth row.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so Gnathostomata just means the fish with jaws, basically. They eat with jaws. I think stome is like eat, isn't it?
I think it's stomach.
Or stomach. Yeah, stomach. Okay. So yeah. And so the first jawed vertebrates were placoderms that were armored placoderms, and then you get your really cool armored placoderms with jaws like Dunkleosteus and your sharks, and also your Osteichthyans, which are the bony fish, which we'll talk
Like
about
you would be.
later. Yep, we are Osteichthyans, or we're members of the bony fish group, which are the ray fin fish and the lobe fin fish. So, anything you want to add?
No, I think I added plenty.
Okay, next slide, please. The Silurian. Another. Oh, I also should have mentioned. I do say it right here. Okay, so 444 to 419 million years ago, this period began with a mass extinction, or the last period ended with a mass extinction, which was likely the result of global cooling. That was the Ordovician Silurian extinction event. So, I didn't really mention it. I didn't have a slide for it, but the earliest evidence of plants on land are like some spores, basically. And I don't think it's really known what they belong to. They're just some little, probably like moss spores, because I think ferns didn't evolve until the Silurian. So just some little mossy spores hanging out. They're probably probably the earliest mosses all like hugged the bodies of water. They probably didn't go too far inland because it was still hot in a lot of places. And even to this day, mosses are still dependent, or many of them, on water for dispersal, either their gametes or their spores. So plants, fungi, and arthropods become more abundant on land. They probably left the safety of their little like pools and branched out further. It's within the Silurian that we get like I said, the ferns, and we get the production of lignin, also, which will have some major consequences for plants and ultimately for life on land as a whole. But we'll get there. Next slide, please. All right. Humans are endurance running tree fish.
Not entirely inaccurate.
I mean, I guess,
That's. I mean, technically, you could say that, and it's not wrong.
Yeah. So, okay. So so Silurian flora. Okay. So we talked about mosses and hornworts and liverworts previously, and that was probably essentially the only land cover in the Ordovician. Well, vascular plants develop in the Silurian. And so vasculature in plants you have what's called xylem and phloem. So xylem predominantly moves water through your plant, and phloem predominantly moves like your organic molecules like glucose and things like that. And so this is important because with a vascular system, you can get a lot bigger. Mosses, in case you haven't noticed, are pretty small, pretty little guys. But lycophytes and ferns and gymnosperms and angiosperms, they have the potential to get a lot bigger, and that is in part due to their vascular systems. So Cooksonia is an early vascular plant. Interestingly, so the green part is the gametophyte, and the brown part on the ends, those are the sporophytes. The other thing is the everything up more derived than a moss is a member of a clade called polysporangiates or something like that. And so instead of making one little sporangium per plant, you can make a bunch, or well, more than one technically.
Hence the name.
Yep. But Cooksonia, its life cycle is also sort of intermediate between that of the mosses and that of the more derived plants, which again, kind of makes sense. It's an early vascular plant. And so its life cycle is sort of like half and half gametophyte and sporophyte. whereas your mosses are predominantly gametophyte, and then everything from here on is going to be predominantly sporophyte. And so that guy down there, Baragwanathia, it's quite a name, is a lycophyte. Lycophytes are sort of similar to the other plants we discussed in terms of their life cycle. Actually, I think I said on the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please.
Peter.
Yeah, there we go. Lycopodiopsida. So a lot of the lycopods that we have today are kind of small. There's those little guys on the left.
Are adorable.
Yeah. But there used to be some really, really big lycophytes, like that guy on the right, which is called Lepidodendron, which is like sort of like a tree. It's like a what do they call them? The club moss trees, right? And so,
I believe that is correct. They're club.
Yeah.
Well, they're called that because they look like the things on, or they're related to the things on the left, which are in fact called club mosses, and
Yes.
they're called that because you can see some clubs at the top of some of those stems.
Yep. So from the Devonian to the Permian, we get these big tree-like forms, even though they're not trees in the same sense as like gymnosperms or angiosperms. But it's essentially the same sort of functional role. You have an arms race between the plants to go up, right? Because someone develops lignin, and lignin can help stabilize your tissues, and this can help you grow taller.
Yep.
But that also means you're casting shade on the next guy. And so they also have an incentive to grow taller. And then you have an incentive to grow taller, and so on and so on. And so we end up with a huge variety of trees. But not all trees, of course. I mean, you can't go on forever growing upwards. And so you can also develop different niches. So maybe instead of growing up, maybe you stay small and you only bloom in the time of the year where the other trees drop their leaves, for instance. So now you have all the sunlight, right? And the other trees aren't using the sunlight because they are relying on their stores of glucose. So, you can diversify into different niches like that. Would you like to add anything?
So this is what's forming the so-called forests, basically, of this time period. And
yeah, the Devonian forest. Yeah,
also
our Lepidodendron
lignin is a big part of coal formation. And the reason that earlier in the Paleozoic we have so much coal formation is that nothing could eat lignin really yet. That hadn't really evolved. So there were basically just giant plants growing. And then when they die, large portions of their biomass just don't get digested by anything. So they turn into coal. So on the one hand, thank you for allowing us to, get out of like the pre-industrial era, but also, coal kind of sucks nowadays. So it's a double-edged sword. Yeah,
the guys, the fungi who are able to digest lignin are called agaricomycetes, and so they developed their lignin degrading enzymes in the, I guess it was in the Carboniferous, and that helped. Now they can break down lignin, whereas nobody could before. So they don't have all these big like trees piling up everywhere.
I mean, we do still get coal formation after that, but it's significantly less common.
Yes, absolutely.
So things like modern peat bogs are on the first step towards producing coal or producing coal. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yep. Next slide, please. And then here we go again. Not super different from the life cycle of the other guys we talked about. So it's hard to see, but the green is your well, I guess that's not entirely true. I can't really say that. You have your so we say microspores and megaspores because they are different in size, right? The microspores are always going to be male, or your micro. The smaller gametes and the smaller spores are typically going to be male because It's the eggs are like more important to make. You make fewer of them, so they are more valuable, right? But you can make lots and lots of sperm cells or microspores. And so, and you've both undergo mitosis to produce sperm and egg. The megaspore becomes the archegonium containing the eggs, which is fertilized by sperm. That's your zygote down there, which grows into your sporophyte, and then you make your spores. You see over there on the strobilus, they make the spores. Then the your megaspore gets fertilized, and then all that fun stuff. Alrighty, round and round the cycle goes. Next slide, please. Or sorry, your megaspore produces becomes the archegonium, which produces the egg, which then gets fertilized, and then you're back to sporophyte stage. So you have a much reduced gametophyte stage now compared to the earlier plants we were looking at. Okay, then some Silurian fauna. Nerepithecanthus, which is an early cartilaginous fish, so related to the sharks and skates and rays. And then I assume that's Giyu, which is an early lobe-finned fish. So he's pretty basally derived with respect to the other lobe-finned fish. He's very, very close to the split between ray and lobe-finned fish. Then Eurypterus, which is a sea scorpion. We mentioned those guys earlier. And then Monograptus, which is a graptolite. So they're also in that hemichordate group with the acorn worms. Would you like to add anything?
Graptolites are really weird, and I have never really understood them.
What is there to understand? They're just vibing, They're just being themselves.
Yeah, but with weird appendages and like colonial living, and it's very strange.
Next slide, please. All right, the Devonian. Woo!
Named after Devonshire.
Yeah, I think a lot of the periods are named for like the old world. Like Perm is a city in Russia, if I remember correctly, which the Permian is named after.
The Jurassic is named after the Jura Mountains, which are also in
Europe. I have to object. As the European in the room, I have to object. There's no such thing as Devonshire.
I disagree.
No, it's Devonshire. It's called Devonshire.
Yeah, you know what though? I'm gonna let you know. American, like North American varieties of English are actually less derived from the common ancestor of modern English, that they share with European and African and even Australian varieties of English. So, American English is actually more authentic. If by authentic we just mean less derived.
Still, SHRIRE spells sure, not shire. Just saying.
Tell it to the Lord of the Rings guys.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. That's not what the Hobbit said.
Yeah, it's
they live in the Shire, not the Shire.
Hobbits. That's the American movie you're referring to? Hobbits?
No, it was actually made in New Zealand. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Those we don't count those people. That's where Gavin Hurleman is from. Nope. Oh, no. Nope.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so
sorry for that.
The Devonshire was from 419 to 359 million years ago. And it is in this period that we find the first tetrapod. So the lobe-finned fish made the transition to tetrapods, the four-limbed vertebrates, which includes amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals.
So, hold on. Are you saying that Doctor Who was wrong in putting a reptilian race of humanoids in the Silurian, and they should have waited for the Devonian at the earliest?
Well, look, all I can say is I don't know if they invented time travel and then went back. to the Solarian. I can't discount that
They
possibility.
probably didn't, because if they did, then they would have just skipped over the extinction event that they went into hibernation to avoid.
Or maybe the fossil record is just that bad, and we just haven't found them yet.
The earliest tetrapods are actually from the Solarian. Surprise, guys. Seems unlikely, but I guess I can't rule it out completely.
I mean, if some people are correct, we should find like elephants in the Solarian rocks and and things like that.
should.
So, but we don't, because wonder why. Anyway, so vascular plants evolve. Okay, so lignin evolved in the so you have vascular plants evolving in the Solarian, and then lignin evolved in the Devonian, and that's what sort of spurred your arms races, which eventually led to the coal swamps, the coal forest, which is where we derive our coal. And so this led to the origin of trees, and in the trees have evolved lots of times. Tree isn't a clade.
They're like crabs, but for plants.
Yeah, lycophytes evolve trees. Gymnosperms evolve trees. I think angiosperms probably evolve trees multiple times. Like, are palms trees? Because they don't have secondary vascular tissue, or so. They're not the same sort of trees as like a magnolia tree, right? Or
Correct.
Or an oak tree. They don't have the same tissues and all that sort of stuff. So anyway,
Tree is basically just big woody stem.
Yeah,
that's it. And woody is just like stem that's mostly stiff, dead tissue.
Right. And so interestingly, this sort of race to be able to do photosynthesis above the other plants living next to you led to an extinction event. So prior to, and I guess we can sort of lead with this because I think this is where I mention it, or this is the only place. So prior to there being big plants with lignified tissue, the only plants on land were small, and they have rhizoids. Basically, they don't have roots that dig deep into the ground, and so these rhizoids, they can't reach very deep, so they're not disturbing the soil all that much. And also, fun fact: before there were plants, there were probably no permanent quote quote lakes or rivers. So think about that and what the implications for that are, because that's really weird to think about, at least for us, I think. And so the minerals that are in the sediment were not leached out. They were taken up by the plants that were living there, but they can't reach very deep into the soil. So they can't leach the minerals out of the soil. They can't move the soil and have it go into rivers and lakes so it can be washed away by rain. But when you started having plants who could reach deeper into the sediment and could result in soil being washed away, this resulted in lots of minerals being moved into bodies of water. Now, what that causes is called eutrophication. So when you flood a body of water with a bunch of minerals, you basically cause the algae to bloom excessively. And this causes anoxia, which is the removal of oxygen from that body of water. They basically sap all the oxygen, or at least most of it, and this kills off fish. Or at least it tends to.
Fish tend to need to breathe.
Fish tend to need to breathe, yeah. If you take away nothing else from this show, fish tend to need to breathe. Please take that away. In case you decide you want fish. Well, what this also causes, as we mentioned earlier with regard to Rodinia, is erosion results in taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which results in global cooling. So you have both eutrophication in the bodies of water, as well as global cooling. So it's not a fun time for anybody. And so that was the extinction event which ended the Devonian. So not a fun time. Would you like to add anything, Dapper?
I don't like cooling. I live in a desert for a reason, a hot desert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Next slide, please.
Why anyone lives any place where the air stings their lungs confuses me.
I agree. I'm not a fan of the snow anymore.
Mm-mm.
Monkey for Banana points out palms are monocots, like grasses, and you are absolutely correct. Palms are monocots, like grasses, and tulips. And well, what else is a monocot? I don't know. Tulips, palms, grasses, those are all monocots. What that means is
The stuff
when
Americans eat.
they're embryonic. What'd you say?
The stuff Americans eat.
Yes.
Corn.
I mean, I think you probably eat monocots.
I mean, yeah,
I mean,
if
yeah,
you
that's
eat
a
any
grass,
grains,
though.
you're eating a monocot.
yeah, that's basically
Like,
grass.
I'm sorry, if you're eating wheat or barley or corn or all of those things, oats.
You're saying,
And so
you're
what
saying,
that means is when they
you're saying
first,
Jackson was looking for one more and he forgot his own name. Okay.
Right?
I mean, I said grasses.
Not wheat though.
I knew I said, wheat is a grass.
Yeah.
Anyway, where was I? Oh, other right, monocots. So monocot refers to monocotyledons. So when plants first push out of their little seeds, and you see them first appearing in coming out of the soil, they have embryonic leaves. Monocots have one embryonic leaf, hence monocotyledon. The embryonic leaves are called the cotyledons. And there is a clade of plants that have two cotyledons, but they are not called the dicotyledons. They are called the eudicotyledons. Fun fact. A fun fact for everybody. Bamboo, reeds, bananas, ginger. Yes, exactly right. Ugly German truths. Oops. I don't know why you're not a moderator. Sorry. I will add you as a moderator.
How dare you?
And these are Rhiniophyta. So Rhiniophyta is also a grade, not a clade. In that they comprise a sort of smattering of plants around the vascular plants. Some are probably pre-vascular plants, some are crown vascular plants. It's a whole bunch of them. And so their life cycle is sort of similar to the ones we've talked to, like lycophytes. You have your male and female sporophytes, and your male and female sporophytes, which then, hold on. You have your gametophytes, which produce gametes. Those get fertilized, and then those produce the sporophytes, which are the little ones on the end, which then produce your male and female spores, which then rain onto the ground, and then your life cycle starts over again. Okay.
That's the cycle part of the life cycle.
Yep. You can tell sedges from grass because sedges have edges. Yep. Next slide, please. Manilophyta. You mentioned like ferns and horsetails, I think, in the Precambrian episode. So here you go. You get your ferns and your horsetails.
Yay! Fractal development isn't dead yet.
These are the last vascular plants to reproduce, via spores. So next slide, please. I think is where I explain it. Yeah. So red is your diploid stage, and blue is your haploid stage. So your sporophyte makes your little sporangia, and the spores essentially, rain down on the ground, and they form your gametophyte, and that's that little upside down heart-shaped structure. And so your gametophyte then produces, male or female gametes, and then the female gametes are then fertilized by the male gametes, and then that causes a zygote, and then on top of your gametophyte grows your sporophyte, and then your cycle starts all over again. So if I hope by now everyone's kind of gotten the picture on the switch between sporophytes and gametophytes. This is how plants reproduce. But now, and also remember, we are in a dominant sporophyte life cycle now rather than dominant gametophyte, as we were with the mosses and with the algae. So we are now, and the reason that we are dealing with dominant sporophyte life cycle now. Dominant gametophyte is for mosses and algae. I hope I said that correctly. Dominant sporophyte is for your lycopods and ferns and gymnosperms, angiosperms. And the reason is you have to make more complex structures. You're getting bigger and you're getting more complex. You need both of your complements of chromosomes to make all these structures. Can't do it with just one anymore, or at least not for very long. So. Anything else?
Ferns are neat. Sometime I'm gonna make a way to make them in 3D that's procedural, and it's gonna be amazing. And that'll probably take me 4 or 5 years.
Nice. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Trilobittles. Because
Still
why not?
kicking.
Yep, why not? We're in with the Devonian. So these are all Devonian trilobittles. Wallacerops, I think, is the coolest. He's my favorite. He's that guy with the little trident for a nose.
Yeah, he's Aquaman's favorite trilobite.
And Quadrops, Ceratarges. Yeah, so the Cambrian trilobites didn't roll into balls. They didn't have spines or shovels or anything like that. They were just kind of little guys hanging out. And then after the Cambrian, they developed all these different structures, probably some, a lot of them for defense, probably, but also probably some for mating.
Intraspecific competition is a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Intra meaning within. Specific means species. All of the science stuff gets really a lot easier if you learn some Latin and Greek words.
That's true. That it do.
In fact, if you know enough Greek and Latin words, you can sometimes manage to pass science tests by just translating words rather than having to remember what they actually mean.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
Learning some English wouldn't go amiss either. Sorry.
True.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that English is the lingua franca.
You go back not too long ago, and even still to some extent today, and there's a fair bit of the relevant paleontological literature is in German.
Yeah.
German's it's no longer as big as it used to be in paleontology, but it's still there, and a lot of the really important earlier work was done in German. So if you want to get really into the whole of the paleontology literature, you should probably learn to read German.
Yeah. In the meantime,
nowadays, even the Chinese are publishing their scientific findings in English.
Yeah, although they are publishing the names not in Latin though.
Well, there's never been a rule that names have to be in Greek or Latin.
Oh well,
it's just been a tradition. So yeah, there's scientific. I mean, that's why you get things like you name some new kind of spider after Barack Obama.
Yeah,
that's not a rule; it's just a tradition.
Having read some Chinese signs that were translated into English using Google Translate, I really hope they're not using that for their scientific papers, because
they're not. They're not. I've read plenty of scientific papers in English coming out of China, and they're not machine translated. I don't know if the authors themselves are actually the ones doing the translation, but clearly it's someone who speaks English quite well.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, the Devonian fauna. So, Dapper, distract them for a moment.
Guys, so Devonian fauna is pretty cool. It's where we're starting to get some of the first sharks, some of the first tetrapods, all sorts of stuff. So, we have things like Ichthyostega, which you can see on the left here, and Tiktaalik, which you can also see on the left. So Ichthyostega would be that guy that's kind of hanging out on that log in the upper left of the left bottom picture. And then Tiktaalik is the one sort of on the far left. And then you've got Eusthenopteron, which is the guy that's underneath the Ichthyostega, and Dunklosteus, the placoderm at the very bottom. Stethocyanthus it's in Chondrichthyes, which is the general group of sharks and skates and rays and other such non-bony fish. And it's closer to sharks than it is to, say, skates. Although exactly where it is that, at like crown sharks appear, it's hard to say. Also, it's not clear what he was doing with that weird dorsal
I'm
fin
back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Which one were you talking about?
Cephalopods. I already identified the various organisms on the left.
Yes. Yeah, he's a weird guy, isn't he? Was it sexual selection or natural selection? What could it have been?
I think that he was being used as an ironing board by other Devonian organisms.
That sounds right to me. I can believe that.
Yeah, why not? I did not get to Xenocampus, though.
Oh, have at it.
I mean, it's also another very, very, very strange shark organism. Another one of the very weird, chondrichthyan animals of the Devonian. Chondrichthyes got really weird. It's currently kind of like relatively boring in terms of weird morphologies. Like, it's basically down to like, you get the basic shark and then you get the basic ray or skate. But in the past, chondrichthyes went all over the place in terms of like exploring available morphospace, if you will.
Yeah, true. That is a relatively early shark. So they hadn't quite figured out how to be a great white yet. That was
you can
way
even see
later.
I mean, look at the tail. It does not look at all like a shark tail.
No, it's not heterocircle as shark tails are. Cephalopods, interestingly, not a shark. Fun fact, because a lot of people, I've seen people refer to it as a shark, but no, it is more closely related to the chimera or the ratfish, whichever one you want to call it. So it's in that group. Same.
To be fair,
as,
most people would probably call that a shark too.
Maybe same as what is it, Helicoprion, however you pronounce it, which has the little weird tooth whorl on his bottom jaw. Very strange. Also not a shark. Next slide, please. Yeah, the origin of lungs. So, interestingly, Darwin thought that the lung evolved from the swim bladder, which not crazy, not an absolutely ludicrous suggestion, but it was wrong. Rather, lungs evolved first, and then the swim bladder evolved from that in the ray fin fish. So lungs evolved from outpocketings of the esophagus. So fish basically would gulp air, and probably I think the ancestor of modern, or the common ancestor of modern osteichthyans was probably freshwater. So freshwater can be very devoid of oxygen, and so it helps if you can like gulp air, which has oxygen in it.
It's kind of like we were talking about earlier. Eutrophic conditions might be a problem sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so coelacanths, lungfish, and polypteriformes, so the bichers and ropefish, they still have lungs. So coelacanths and lungfish are more closely related to us, but bichers are the most basally derived ray fin fish. I actually happen to have one. He's a cool little guy. And then the more derived ray fin fish like sturgeons and paddlefish, bowfins and gars, they have these highly vascularized gas bladders because it's still not quite a lung yet. It's sort of in that transitional state, I guess you might say. But then by the time you get to teleost, you have your full-on swim bladder. And in fact, among the other like primitive ray fin fish, you still have like the arteries that go from like your lungs to your heart, or from their lungs to their heart, stuff like that, which you don't really need if it's a closed off gas bladder.
Yeah,
but that was more for oxygen.
Teleost fish make up the vast majority of the fish you've ever seen.
Yes, yeah, pretty much all the all the primitive ray fin fish. That's them, like right there. That's all of them. Bichers, paddlefish, sturgeons, gars, bowfins. That's all of them.
Also, gar is the only surviving use of the word Old English gar, which means spear, and they were called garfish or spearfish. And now that's the word spear has taken over, and so now we have garfish, and no one knows why they're called that, because that's not a real word, except it was.
Because that's not a real word. I like that.
It was a real word.
So, anything you want to add?
I just did.
Other than the gar bit. All right, fine. Next slide, please.
I guess pelagic tunicates must be destroyed.
Fair enough. These are these are lobe fin fish, the Sarcopterygii. So Gogonasus, Hyneria, Tristicopterus, those are all different lobe fin fish that are all extinct now. But I believe I believe they're more derived, so they're more closely related to us than lungfish are. They're all
Yes, I believe those are stegocephalian sarcopterygians, which is the
Yeah.
group to which tetrapods belong, but that excludes the South American and African lungfish.
Yes, and the Australian lungfish.
Yeah, can't forget about that guy.
Yeah, Neoceratodus represent.
Yeah, but Australia's fake.
Fair enough. What was I even saying? What was I thinking?
Sarcopterygians. They're the group to which tetrapods belong. They're called lobe-finned fish because their fins are characterized by relatively strong muscles attached to relatively robust bones, unlike the rayfin fish that have some kind of spindly little spiny bones that are the rays.
Yes.
Although, interestingly, the genetic pathways that control the embryological development of the ray fins and the lobe fins are very deeply homologous. So,
Yep.
you can, if you read, I would suggest reading Your Inner Fish by Neil Shubin. It's
Also
excellent.
highly recommend.
Yes.
And
It's also not a
Flora-
very expensive tome. It's fairly inexpensive. I
True.
think I've seen it for like less than $10 US.
They're predators which should be kept with other. Bichers are cute little dino fish. They're predators which should be kept with other fish. Indeed, I have them with my African cichlids because they are also African fish. So they all hang out together. Fun stuff. So, next slide, please. All right, so now we are even closer. So you got rayfin fish, and then lungfish, and then you have your Snapper says your stegocephalians. So Eustinopteron is one of our, is very primitive, but you can still see the bone structure, or sort of the outline of the bone structure that we have in our arms in it. It has the humerus, radius, and ulna, and then the distal elements, just like we have today, but it's in a slightly different configuration. And same is true of Panderichthes and Tiktaalik and Acanthostega and Ichthyostega and Tularpaton. And then you get to us. Or you get to all your living tetrapods.
I've heard someone say that we didn't find Tiktaalik's limbs because the pictures he was looking at only showed Tiktaalik in dorsal view.
Well, that's what we call wrong.
Mhm.
So,
And this man was a professional geologist.
well, has he considered not lying, perhaps?
No, apparently he has not.
Well,
Just- By the way, that's a preview for next Thursday's show on my channel. On my channel, not this one.
Interestingly, Acanthostega had 8 digits on its hands, and 8 little fingers. And then Ichthyostega had only 7, and Tularpaton had 6. So I think that's very interesting. And then we ended up with our little pentadactyl limbs by the common ancestor of all extant tetrapods.
What a little
What do you
fact.
need all those fingers for, man? I've got 3.5 and it works just fine.
Jackson, fun
What'd you
fact.
say, Peter?
A friend of mine has 6 digits on her feet.
So is she a Tularpaton?
I told her she was lucky. And she said, why? And I said, you're lucky that they don't make socks the same way they make gloves.
That's, well,
And then she hit
they
me.
do, though. I have seen some socks with independent toes.
I have
Oh,
to.
yeah. Aren't those like for running or something?
I don't know. I've seen some for running, but I've also seen some that were just like made of like fluffy wool, and I think it was just like
Oh,
a warmth thing. I don't know.
weird. All right.
How many people's toes get cold?
I guess, allegedly.
I don't know what that's like because I live in the desert.
I also wanted to bring to your attention Parmastega. So, Tiktaalik was discovered back in 2004, I think, something like that. Almost 2 decades ago now. Wow, look at the time. Tiktaalik was discovered by Shubin et al. Up in Arctic Canada. But now we have tetrapods or stem tetrapods which are intermediate between Tiktaalik and Acanthostega. And that is Parmastega. So we have transitional fossils between the transitional fossils.
Parmastega kind of sounds like an Italian dish.
Kind of does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything you want to add? Other than sounds like an Italian dish.
No, I mean, I think we covered it pretty well. And yeah, I do like how obvious it is that you get this nice, smooth transitional gradient, almost like, there are transitional fossils.
Almost, but we wouldn't want to just assume now, would we?
Mm-mm. I mean, can you tell if any of those fossils had babies?
I can't. Not from here, anyways. My screen's a little small. So, chicken. Ugly German Truth says chicken Parmastega.
Yum. I would totally eat some chicken Parmastega.
If you want to close the circle, Jackson, Parma is in Italy and it's famous for ham, which proves you that creationism is true.
Oh, there it is. Evolution wrecked. Let's retire, Jackson.
I'm ready to retire as long as we get a good pension.
I don't think evolution pays very well.
Well, Al Gore owes me a check. It's been 6 years now. Where's my check, Al Gore?
Seriously, I'm still waiting for my first shield check from the USGS.
Yep.
Everyone's like, "Oh, are you a NASA shield?" No, clearly I'm a USGS shield. Come on, guys. That's the United States Geological Survey, for those of you who might not be familiar.
Those uninitiated.
Yeah. Well, it's not exactly as well known as NASA.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay, developmental plasticity and the origin of tetrapods. So this was an interesting paper I came across from Donald Prothero's book, Evolution, What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. Well, I know it's in addition, the second edition. I haven't read the first edition, but it may be in there. Who knows? But what these researchers did was they raised some bichers out of water, and their pectoral girdle developed like that of stem tetrapods rather than like that of ray fin fish, which is what they are. And this allowed them to move around more easily on land than bichers that had been raised in water. So that ability to change your pectoral girdle during your lifetime, there is that genetic basis for it. And so through was it genetic accommodation, probably, if I remember correctly, the individuals who could, who had that survived on average better than those without, and they were able to move around better on land than those who didn't have that. And so this developmental plasticity probably contributed to the development of tetrapod limbs. So, fun fact. I thought it was really neat.
Does that mean that if we raised humans their entire lives in water, that they would develop pectoral girdles more like that of ray-finned fish?
Absolutely.
All right, guys, get on it. I want to see some aqua babies.
There was a oh gosh, what was it? There was a documentary quote about like how mermaids would exist. Like,
oh yes, Mermaid, the body found. It was hilarious.
Yeah, wasn't it like if our ape ancestors evolved into mermaids also?
Yeah, it was. So the idea was like some other group of hominins ended up hanging out by the beach a lot, which, to be fair, hominids did hang out by the beach. Yeah. But then just, they took a line out of, Death Clock's album, and they just went into the water, lived there, died there, and became the mermaids of legend after, like, their hind limbs fuse into a paddle-like thing, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then, like, they had, like, these quote-unquote artifacts that would wash ashore sometimes, and they had some really bad, like, CGI found footage of these mermaids. And I thought it was hilarious, but the thing was that they didn't actually advertise it as a mockumentary. It just went up, and there were people who bought it because, like, nothing about it said, hey, this is not real, until, like, the very end, where there's, like, a little blurb in the credits about how this is a work of fiction.
Right.
And
well,
no one watches the documentary credits.
They did something kind of like that for dragons, didn't they, a long time ago? was like
They did, but that was a little bit more explicitly like tongue in cheek.
Okay, gotcha.
Because like there's a whole shell story about like a fictional doctor who finds a mummified like dragon corpse in a cave somewhere, and like it was a little bit less.
It wasn't as well hidden, basically.
Right. Yeah. Especially since like there was no like the interviews with talking heads weren't like hidden as like, oh yeah, we're just talking about this as a real thing. This is a real scientist. Like they were using like clearly they're like, oh well,
if this
if
were
dragons,
a thing, it probably would be like this. Yeah.
Right. So that was also a fun one. But yeah, don't take those seriously. They're works of fiction, but Yeah. The Discovery Channel actually did get in a bit of trouble for the mermaid one because it was not well explained that this was fictional.
Ah, gotcha. Well, we're almost to the 2-hour mark, so I guess we'll just call it here. And then we'll pick up next time. So we made it to the Devonian. So we did decently. We made it through like 2 or 3.
Yeah, but we're going to spend the most time on the Permian.
200. We made it through like 200 million years. So 2 billion years in the first episode, 200 million years in the second. So there you go.
So next time we're going to make it 20 million years. No, sorry. Yeah, 20 million. Then 2 million.
And then like 200,000 years.
Yeah.
It'd be like a super in-depth look at like one particular fossil site and the strata going through it. I mean, that'd be really cool.
All right, guys. So let's take a look at the Morrison Formation.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I did see a paper not too long ago about it was these Vietnamese fossil sites spanning like the Triassic to the end Cretaceous. Ooh. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's really cool.
I mean, that's like something in theory we could.
Did you hear that there's a potential for the first ever dinosaur find to actually have been killed by the asteroid of the KPG extinction?
Okay, there are so many red flags with De Palma's group. Look, people, look. I am just as excited about the news as anyone. But the first thing he did was like he published and ran to or wrote up the paper and ran to a popular journal, like a popular magazine at the same time, which is basically what Andrew Wakefield did when he wrote his study about like why vaccines cause autism. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, you do not do that. That's not okay in science. And he did it not once. He's done it again. I don't think the paper's out. I can't find it. The paper on the dinosaur, which I think they said was a Thescelosaurus in the BBC article, it's not out yet. You can't even read the article. Mm-mm. So like, what the heck?
I'm going to go ahead and say, one, it's probably a cool find no matter what.
Sure.
However, the claims about it being the dinosaur or being a dinosaur that died in the actual impact event, take that with one of those big salt lamp grains worth of salt.
Yeah, take it with a grain of Lot's wife.
There you go.
But like,
because that's Dead Sea salt, and that stuff's full of like sand and silt and stuff. Go with Himalayan pink salt. It's just salt, and also fossils of microorganisms, which make it pink.
I mean, they claimed at the very outset, like, we found fish with like tektites in their gills. We found dinosaurs. We found pterosaurs. We found like birds and stuff. It's like, okay, those are all cool on their own. I don't know if they all necessarily correlate with the KPG impactor. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't.
There's only so many explanations for tektites.
I mean, well, for the fish, yeah. But he was like, we found fish with tektites and also pterosaurs and dinosaurs and birds and stuff. So it's like, okay, cool. Pretty much all they've done at this point is like sedimentological analyses. The very first paper they published, which was in 2019, was on the sedimentology of the site, which is how you're supposed to go about if you're digging up fossils, instead of just claiming you found a dinosaur fossil that has soft tissue in it and you don't do a review of the site.
Oh, my goodness.
And then I believe they have published a paper on the tektites in the fish. So, but that's like been the only fossil so far.
So that was published. Actually, it was not super recently.
Yeah, I think it was maybe last year was when they published that.
Yeah.
So it's only been like 2 papers so far.
And that one actually, I think, had some pretty solid evidence of saying it was at the Chicxulub impact.
Sure.
It had the tektites. It had the whole assemblage was in tsunamite. Like, yeah,
I'm not
Pretty-
opposed to this, like, by any means. I think it'd be absolutely awesome if all these fossils, are the result of the KPG impactor. That'd be awesome. That'd be
Really
really, really cool. I don't know if it's the case at the moment because, like I said, he's going to like the BBC
yeah. Don't do
before publishing or while publishing. So, like, yeah, no, not great.
that. I think that's a violation of many journals' submission guidelines.
Oh, maybe it is. I don't know, but
I think that can actually be a reason for your paper to be rejected.
Yeah.
Which would suck.
at the very least, like, if it turns out that your claims can't be substantiated, like, you're gonna get reamed. You went to the newspaper, claimed all these things, and then you can't substantiate your claims. You're just absolutely destroyed in the scientific community.
It would be like if some silly person decided to go to National Geographic with what was actually two different fossils glued together, and everyone had told them about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Almost like that would happen. Circus. Anyway. Dapper, what's happening on your channel in the near to distant future?
Okay, so I'm going to pull up a calendar here. So Saturday, I have a Leaving Young Earth Creationism with a fellow named Randall. Tuesday should be Matt with Maddie, which is myself and Maddie from Science Side Up are going to take a look at a raw Matt video, which, Maddie drew the short straw when it came to the pun names. She really did, because it's either Matt Powell or Raw Matt, and that's all we got. The 20th, this is not going to be on my main channel. This is going to be on my off-topic channel, Top Hats Off. I'm going to be streaming the first episode of Power Rangers Jungle Beasts, which is a RPG that TD Lane slightly strong-armed me into running. It's literally because he was pestering me that I bothered to get the book and go ahead and start running it. So
mission accomplished, it sounds like.
Yes, that'll be at 4 p.m. Pacific, which is 7 p.m. Eastern. So if you like live streamed RPGs, go there. The 21st is going to be the supercut of Andrew Snelling is a Liar. So it's going to be a 2-hour long premiere where we just go through the entirety of Andrew Snelling's flood speech and pick apart everything he says. Then I have no idea what's happening on the 16th. I have no idea what's happening on the 23rd. The 26th, though, Jackson, you are going to be on my channel for
With
Jackson with Jackson. Yes.
Yeah.
Jackson with Jackson. We're going to take a look at Charles Jackson.
And his shenanigans.
Yes. Then something will happen on the 28th. I don't know. But also the 27th, I should be on Cheshire Vic's channel for Guns, Magic, and Steel at that same time, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern, for a Dungeons & Dragons live stream where I play a dwarf artificer with a very bad Scottish accent.
I'm sure that is a blast.
It is. I don't know why you're not watching, Jackson.
I don't know either. I can't tell you.
Well, I'll send you the playlist.
So, well, thank you everyone for watching in the side chat. Got 24 people watching right now. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Dapper, for being here as always.
You're welcome.
We will finish the Paleozoic next time, I imagine, and maybe get to the Mesozoic. We'll find out. And
I doubt we'll spend 2 hours talking about like the Permian.
Yeah, no, I doubt it too. And then thank you, Peter, for hosting as always. And
You're most
good
welcome.
night, everybody. See you next time.